Most RAG failures are not retrieval failures. They are context assembly failures, and that is worse because the system looks smart right before it lies.
Exactly. Retrieval can find good pieces, then assembly can stitch them into a misleading prompt. If you do not test assembly directly, you are grading the wrong layer.
So when people say, our top K looks solid, our re-ranker is strong, our answer quality is mixed, you are saying the real bug may be in how the final context is built?
Yes, context assembly is the step that chooses, orders, trims, labels, and frames evidence before generation. That step should prove one thing: the model received the right evidence in the right shape with the right priorities to support a correct answer.
That sounds obvious until money is on the line. Give me a concrete failure.
A support bot gets two documents. One says a refund is allowed within 30 days. Another says enterprise contracts are non-refundable unless the rider is present. The user is enterprise. Retrieval found both. Assembly put the general rule first, clipped the exception, and the bot promises a refund that legal will reject.
So the test is not, did we fetch useful text? The test is, did the final package preserve the decision boundary?
Right. Assembly tests should check whether the final prompt contains enough evidence to answer, excludes evidence that should not dominate, keeps crucial qualifiers intact, and presents conflicts in a way the model can resolve instead of averaging them.
Let us make that operational. What inputs do you need to test this without drifting into vibes?
You need a query set, a corpus snapshot, and for each query, an evidence spec. The evidence spec is the key. It names the facts, constraints, citations, or spams that must appear in the assembled context for a valid answer.
Not ideal answers first. Evidence first.
Exactly, because assembly is upstream of answer wording. If the prompt never included the exception, the model cannot be blamed for missing it. Your expected evidence should also define harmful distractors, like stale policy versions or near duplicate passages that can drown the important clause.
Give me another example, but one that hurts a production team.
A medical coding assistant adds a physician note and a billing rule. The note mentions suspected pneumonia, but the rule requires confirmed diagnosis for a specific code. Retrieval finds both. Assembly truncates the rule right before the word confirmed. The answer recommends the billable code. That is not a bad generation flourish. That is a bad assembly artifact.
Now we are in audit territory. So what counts as evidence in the test output?
3 levels. First, presence. Did the final context include the mandatory spans or semantically equivalent statements? Second, integrity. Were they intact, not cut mid-condition, not stripped of dates, negations, or scope? Third, salience. Were they placed and labeled so the model would likely use them rather than ignore them?
Salience sounds slippery. How do you score it without hand-waving?
Use explicit heuristics. Position score for where a required fact appears. Conflict score for whether contradictory evidence is adjacent and labeled as conflict. Coverage score for how many required facts are present. Contamination score for presence of banned or stale evidence. Then combine them into a pass rule tied to risk.
So, not one giant mystery metric.
Never. For a low-risk FAQ, maybe 80% coverage with no contamination passes. For legal or medical use, all critical facts must be present, no banned evidence allowed, and every required qualifier must remain intact. One missing negation is an automatic fail.
Let me pressure test that. Suppose the final answer still turns out correct by luck. Do you pass assembly?
No. Assembly should be judged on whether it supplied trustworthy support, not whether the model guessed right. Lucky wins are dangerous because they hide prompt construction debt until the next query hits the edge case.
This is where teams split, right? One side says, ship what works on answer evals. The other says, if the evidence path is weak, you are building a liability machine.
And the second side is right for any system with policy, compliance, finance, or safety stakes. Winners are the teams that can show not just accuracy, but evidential discipline under pressure.
Walk me through one practical test case from start to finish.
Take an internal HR assistant. Query: can a contractor access parental leave benefits? Corpus snapshot includes employee handbook, contractor policy, and an old benefits memo. Expected evidence says the assembled context must include the contractor policy clause excluding employee benefits and the current handbook date, and must exclude the old memo because it was superseded.
Then, you run retrieval and assembly and inspect only the final context.
Yes, if the final context includes the old memo, contamination fail. If it includes the handbook but misses the contractor exclusion, coverage fail. If it includes the exclusion but trims off the phrase not eligible for company-sponsored leave, integrity fail. If all mandatory evidence is present, intact, and the stale memo is absent, pass.
What if the assembly includes 10 extra chunks that are harmless but noisy?
That should count against salience and context efficiency. Noise is not neutral. It pushes decisive evidence down, increases conflict, and raises the chance of a hedged or wrong answer. In high-stakes flows, too much irrelevant context is a soft failure, even when the needed clause is technically present.
So, the practical scoring model is coverage, integrity, contamination, and salience, with thresholds that get stricter as risk goes up.
Yes, and log the reason for every failure in those terms. Then product, retrieval, and prompt teams can act on it. Missing clause means fetch or selection issue. Truncated qualifier means assembly budget or formatting issue. Stale policy inclusion means source governance issue.
That is the part people miss. A good test does not just fail the system, it points to the owner.
Exactly. Context assembly tests should turn a fuzzy, wrong answer into a precise diagnosis of what evidence was missing, malformed, overpowered, or wrongly admitted.
Which means you stop arguing about whether the model is dumb and start asking whether the prompt gave it a fair trial.
And that changes how you build RAG. The strongest systems do not just retrieve relevant text. They prove the final context can carry the answer without cheating, guessing, or collapsing under noise.
That is a sharp line.
If your assembled context cannot prove the answer, your answer quality is an illusion, waiting for a costly query.